Welcome, one and all, to the Magick Music Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Matthew, and in this series, we will be discussing various occult and esoteric practices in music, art, and culture. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the unknown together. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the very first episode of the Magick Music Podcast. During this series, we're going to be talking about different occult and esoteric practices as they relate to music, art, and popular culture. I decided to start this podcast because I've always had an affinity for things that I cannot explain. Whether it's UFOs or ghosts, things that are just otherworldly, that are not in this physical domain that we live in. And I am a musician. I'm an audio engineer. I have my bachelor's degree in music. So my entire life, I've been obsessed with music. I play bass guitar, electric guitar, drums, do a little bit of singing. Kind of describe myself as like a one-stop shop band where, I could probably, make like a demo of myself playing as one band, kind of like Dave Grohl did on the first Foo Fighters record. I'm not like an expert or like an extraordinaire at one instrument. I'm kind of broad with all of them, and I just have an affinity for just music in general, like how it sounds. I love mixing music, writing songs, being a part of a process with other musicians. I've been in various bands over the years, different rock bands. I make my own music as well. So it's very, very fun for me. So let's get into it. I mean, I think that this episode, since it's the first episode, we'll kind of just go over some basic terminology in the occult, starting with, like, what is it? Like, what is the occult? And my journey with the occult started probably when I was about 10 years old. My father had a decent record collection down in our basement. And, I would go down there and I would, sift through his records and just like stare at the artwork because it was so fucking cool, to see all these bands and like what the people looked like, and that's the guy that like sang that song or played guitar on that song. You felt this connection with that person even though you've never met them before. And one of the records that stood out to me the most out of all of them was Led Zeppelin 4. And that's the record that, basically has the hermit representation of the tarot card, where he's up on the hill with the lantern and he's looking down at this small town. And it's kind of like a gatefold, so you open up the record all the way and you can see the hermit, like this wizard looking guy. He's got a big white fucking beard and like he just looks super cool. And I was like, holy shit. Like 10-year-old me was like losing my fucking mind looking at this thing. Like I thought it was so cool. And then also what fascinated me about that record was, songs aside, I mean, it's a brilliant record. It has, some of their best tracks. Zeppelin classics on that one. Stairway, of course, Rock and Roll, Black Dog. Every single song on there is basically a fucking hit. What really piqued my interest was seeing, their individual symbols that they had, or sigils. Jimmy Page, the guitarist for Led Zeppelin, his famous sigil was, I don't know if it's called Zozo, but it's ZOSO. That's kind of what it looks like. And then also Robert Plant was a feather. And then John Paul Jones and John Bonham had their own symbols, like the Holy Trinity. And yeah, I just can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but yeah, they were super, super interesting to look at that and go, wow, you can identify as like a symbol if you want to, like that you can make a piece of art that, people can just recognize you by seeing that symbol. You're like, oh yeah, that's Jimmy Page, like right off the bat. So I started, kind of looking into it. When I was probably in my early 20s, but I've always loved just, ancient stuff and yeah, just looking at like ancient cultures and what they believed and how it kind of resonates with modern day religion. I grew up around Christianity, but I kind of went to church on Sunday and, I went with my parents. I was baptized and did communion, confirmation, all the steps, to take, the necessary steps to take to become like a full-fledged Christian that will one day possibly get into heaven. And I'm not here to knock any kind of religion. I think religion is beautiful. It gives someone purpose. It gives someone something to look forward to. It gives them faith and just kind of like a stable rock, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad, like, or any deity that you feel this connection to. I didn't really feel a connection with Jesus or God. Like when I was younger, it was strange. If God was this, all knowing, all powerful being, why is there so much like horrible shit in the world? Like you would think he would want to make this paradise, right? That was my question, was like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I choosing to go to this place where I don't feel a connection? And with the people or the priest or whatever. And it kind of depends on the church too. Like if you, go to a smaller church where everybody, there's like 50 people in there or like maybe even less. It's a small church. You feel that sense of community. You feel connected to something, so much bigger than you are that you can't even fucking fathom it. So I think that's great for those people. But for me, like I kind of stemmed off into this stuff because there's not really like a school besides, I guess, like, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or the Illuminati. And there's all these like ridiculous, like negative connotations about the occult. And I think that in popular culture, it's been like demonized. Like, oh, you only use it to fucking summon these horrific things, these really dark things. And yes, you can go down that path. You can go way down, like way the fuck down. And you can get into some really dark shit. And it's hard to get out of it. So I'm here to kind of just, explain to people that there is a bright side to it. Most of it is good, positive, spiritual energy. And, there are there's various occultists throughout time that have tried to explain these practices like in full and the best way that they can. You have different types of practices that can resonate with you. It's such a vast topic that you can definitely get lost in it. It's like a sea of things that you may or may not perceive. That's why people don't really possibly resonate with it too much. Like, yeah, it's like if you don't resonate with it, there's definitely a reason for it. And it is because it's very dense. very dense to get into. So I hope to kind of just help you guys learn, or help you guys, help to figure out, some of these things and how you can apply them in your own life, and specifically in like a musical and artistic context. So when I was getting into Zeppelin, I started doing some research when I was younger, and came across all these different things and all these different stories about how Jimmy Page was a huge fan of Aleister Crowley. And Aleister Crowley he's a pretty famous occultist. I think he's known as the most evil man in the world. He wrote some really, really influential books, very dark books. He came up with the idea of thelema, and he had that famous phrase in his book of the law, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," which is actually printed on, I think, the inner cover of Led Zeppelin 3. So, Jimmy Page, he got into this stuff. He got into this stuff at an early age and was fascinated by it. One of the other concepts that Crowley talked about was sex magic, and how you can use, your sexual powers to channel it into something else. Jimmy Page was an incredible guitarist. Before he was in Zeppelin, he was in the Yardbirds, and before that, he had an amazing career as a studio musician. He was the go-to guy for a lot of sessions back in the day. A lot of artists who were looking for a guitarist that could fingerpick really well, and he was an amazing acoustic guitar player. Still is. I mean, he's still alive. He's still with us. But yeah, and an amazing guitarist in general. He definitely imbued a lot of symbolism into the music and into the lyrics themselves. I mean, Stairways just, has so many references that, are kind of unexplained. And I think that if you leave something alone and you let your fans kind of figure it out for themselves, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in just kind of letting things out into the wild without giving an explanation for it. And that band did that very, very well. I mean, they rarely gave interviews. They were, a lot, like they were kind of like behind the scenes. Like they were Led Zeppelin was four, just amazing musicians that came together under one roof to make incredible songs. And Jimmy Page, I think he is a magician. Like he has channeled all of these things into creating something that is just has lasted a lifetime, and it will continue to last. I mean, it's 2025 right now. I mean, Zeppelin started in like the mid to late 60s, and still their influence is like, it's so strong. But, I think maybe, and I don't know this for a fact, but maybe Jimmy got lost in a lot of that stuff. Like maybe his head was like spinning because he was, he had all this fame, and it's like, how do you deal with it? And you're like, reading into a guy like Aleister Crowley, who had a lot of interesting things to say, but, was probably not the best person in the world. He was probably a very narcissistic individual. Yeah, that believed in like hedonism and just taking things for yourself. But, you could also spin that another way of like, do what thou wilt for the betterment of mankind. And yeah, Zeppelin was one of those acts that was just a powerhouse. And there's so many things that have affected that band over time. There was the Led Zeppelin curse, where, a lot of horrible things happen. Robert Plant got into a car accident. I think he lost his son. John Bonham, passed away. Yeah, that Zeppelin curse, people thought it was because, of Jimmy Page and how he acquired Boleskine House, which for Crowley was like, that's where he practiced a lot of his rituals and his seances. And maybe, Jimmy Page like channeled like some kind of demon, to enter into that world, to enter into the band's music. Possibly. I don't know. It's all speculation. But at the end of the day, their influence remains like very, very strong. And they've influenced a ton of other bands. And, how can you take what Zeppelin did and kind of apply it to your own life? How can you apply it to writing a song? Like, where does that idea come from? Like, where does that idea stem from? Does it come from within? Or does it come from, like, the ether? Does it come from something outside of yourself, outside of this physical plane, and into the spiritual plane? Does a being just drop it into your head? Does it plant a seed? Or are you influenced by, like, other people that might say a word to you or say a phrase to you to get your mind really thinking? And I think it's probably both. I think that, just enacting your own will onto something, that's magic. That's magic. Most people think about magic as if you are pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Someone's like, doing all these tricks and like they're fooling you. But I don't know if I would call that magic. Because I think magic might be life itself, like the essence that makes up life. We're more than just this physical body. We have so much more that drives us, that pushes us to do something. It's like, why do people want to create things? Like, why do people want to have children? You enact that ritual of having sex with somebody, and then next thing you know, you have a baby, and then that baby grows up, and you are basically continuing this cyclical pattern over and over and over again. But the will to create is such a strong will, such a strong desire in people. And it's as if, we are channeling something from another realm. And whether that's, a good entity or a bad entity, it's still something that's being channeled, and you should be very wary of. Because once you open that door, you have to close it. And if you forget to close that door, I'm not saying a demon will, harass you and, make your life a living hell, but, there might be a good chance of that. I don't have any proof for that, but maybe the people who are listening, maybe you guys have experiences that like you want to share. Like I'm very, very open to that. I think on the next podcast, I'll kind of talk about that, having those experiences, like seeing like like a loved one or a friend or relative, like that you have maybe like a dream of them, and then you write a song about them the next day, and you think about them, and you take that idea of like, oh, I just saw like this person in the dream, and then the next day you're like, oh, I miss this person so much, I'm going to write a song about them. I'm going to make a video about them. I'm going to remember what their legacy was, and do my best to show honor for that. So yeah, this is something that it's going to be a work in progress. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you guys. And thank you so much for joining me on the very first episode. And I hope you guys, I hope I got the gears spinning in your heads of like just thinking about this stuff. And like, we're going to delve into more specifics, like, in each episode coming up. Because I know this one was kind of like broad and general and talking about like Zeppelin a little bit. But yeah, we're going to go a lot further into this stuff as the next episodes come out. So thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe, and I hope you guys have had a happy Easter, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much, guys.